Hello and very good afternoon, everybody. My name is Antonis Michail, and thank you, Oscar, for the kind introduction. In this first afternoon session of SmartPort's Peers of the Future, second day, we're going to be discussing decarbonization and energy transition at large. And we're going to discuss with an excellent group of panelists that I have here today, you know, the role of ports, the business models that are being put in place, and all those important issues. I'm going to start by introducing the panel. I'll start with Namrata Nadkarni, CEO and founder of Intent Communications. But Namrata, I think that your most important hat, and you have many hats lately, would be in this discussion your role as the chair of the Fuels Working Group at WPCAP, the World Ports Climate Action Program.
Climate Action Program, absolutely.
A very warm welcome, Namrata. Second, Hector, he's the head of environmental sustainability in the Port of Barcelona, our host. Hector, great to have you on board and very much looking forward to discussing these important things with you.
Thank you very much.
And last but definitely not least, it's Elvir Dzanic. He's the CEO and president of the Port of Gothenburg. Elvir, great to have you on board for this discussion.
Great to be here.
Great. I'm not going to go into your complete bios, etc. People can read it on the internet. You know, we have them on the pages on the website of the conference and all. But we'll go on a very short introduction on decarbonization and energy transition. Actually, in fact, I don't think that it requires much introduction. The topic is so high in the agendas and in the work of all of us nowadays, in my work as well, within the International Association of Ports and Harbors. We do have all the Politica fora that are discussing the decarbonization and energy transition. We just finished COP27. We will be having discussions at IMO in December when it comes to the decarbonization of shipping and some very important decisions. But of course, leading ports and smart ports are not here to follow those developments, are here to lead and to drive these developments and this transition. And I think, especially in the context of the Smart Ports Conference, it would be great if after this session we will be able to define what is really a smart port when it comes to energy, when it comes to energy transition, when it comes to decarbonization. So I'll start straight away with my first question, I would say, maybe to the ports of the panel first, to Elvir and to Hector. And I would like to give you the floor maybe to say a couple of words and to outline your port vision on energy transition and decarbonization overall, but most importantly, how you're intending to put this in place. It is a huge challenge, right? We have to decarbonize transport, decarbonize infrastructure, new business models may be required. How do you see all the situation and this challenge? How you're addressing it in the Port of Gothenburg, Elvir? A very proactive port, I have to say, within our membership in IAPH and within the world overall. So the floor is yours.
Thanks. So first of all, I really enjoy this setting because it does remind me of our reality where we as sports try to make our voices heard in the middle of a large crowd and conversation. We're all fighting for attention. So the setting is perfect in that sense. Back home, Port of Gothenburg has decided to have what we call a Green Connection program. It rests on two legs. One, we will invest in accessing and accelerating the green transition. The idea is that we will provide infrastructure and production capacity for green molecules, be that LNG, LBG, ammonia, e-methanol, and hydrogen. And we have come a very long way in a very short period of time. But just producing green molecules or having the infrastructure to take care of them logistically is not enough. Our second leg is the decarbonization of the transports that go through the port. We are already, since February 2021, carbon neutral in the port and the port terminals. But that's far from enough. For us to really make an impact, we need to, and we will find business models to ensure that the assets that come to the port from land side and ocean side are also green, because we are not a green port if we continue to do business with gray ships and gray trucks. So again, our program rests on two pillars: create the infrastructure to produce and transport green molecules, and have a business model so that we expedite the transition of the transport to and from the port.
And we talk about shipping, we talk about trucking, we talk about all transport modes as well,
yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. Hector.
Well, first of all, thank you to invite me here in my city. It's a pleasure to be here and to explain the Barcelona port view. For us, energy transition is the main axis, one of the main axes of our strategic plan. And it's also the main tool that we have to decarbonize not only the port and maritime activity, but also the logistic chain. For us, it's the main tool, okay? And we see the port in the future, or in the near future, from now on to the future, as a hub, as an energetic hub, but not only looking the seaside, but also the yard, the gate, and the hinterland, because the port has two different parts, the shipping and also all the terrestrial transport. So it's very important to include all this, all the chain in the transformation. Okay. For me, now the ports, since the energy is a key factor, we have to change the role. We have to pass from the landlord, the typical landlord management, to the one that is more investor or even the developer. Okay, because it's a disrupting situation. Energy is in the first plane now. It's not anymore a mere utility. It's a key factor. So we have also to change the view. The port has to lead this transformation. It's not only a passive wait and see and just to facilitating some services, some spaces. And then there is another part that is very important, is to link, to align the port management, the port space management, the master port with the energy transition, to reserve spaces, to design facilities, design infrastructures, to see the links with other hubs, to look at the industry with another view, because maybe the industry, the new plans of generation must be in the port. So we have to create all this planet and design a good plan. For me, the transition plan is linked with the port planning. We have to define a green master plan. This is the key for us.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I was about to say, as somebody who is not a port, so my background is a communications expert, but I've been writing about maritime for 20 years, I have so much sympathy for the ports because you're facing a really complex landscape, right? We're not just looking at a single fuel to help you decarbonize. We're looking at multiple fuels. We're looking at multiple different infrastructures. We're looking at planned obsolescence of some fuels and some infrastructures because we know they're not going to be green enough in the future, but we need them now. There's a lot to consider. And I mean, Hector, I think you nailed it when you talked about the fact that ports are the link between ship and shore, right? So we have to initiate the conversations because I think there are a lot of maritime conversations happening about decarbonization, and there are a lot of land-based national conversations happening about meeting Paris Climate Accords, and there's not that much overlap to actually bring supply and demand together and also talk about where we're competing, right? Because we need this fuel in order to green maritime because we have definitive targets. However, different countries also have definitive targets, and we're going to have to compete with them for fuels because they're going to want to green the grid. So we're looking at such a complex landscape, and we have to get the money, we have to get the planning, we have to get the skills, we have to make sure this is a just transition. It's a really complex landscape, and you can't think of decarbonization as a single entity. I think you genuinely have to look at it almost like something with tendrils everywhere, and you've just got to see where you put your interests, and we have to work together if we want to get any leverage at all. And I'm happy to talk about what we're doing at WPCAP really quite quickly, I hope, which is, so the World Port Climate Action Programme, for those of you who don't know it, it's a coalition of different ports around the world, and in the working group that I'm working in, which is on alternative fuels, we're actually working with the IAPH. We have come up with the port readiness level, and basically what this does is it's very similar to the technology readiness level that you have with NASA. It's an assessment and communication tool. It allows a port to look at itself and say, look, right now we're still at the research phase for hydrogen, but we're at the deployment phase for LNG, and we're actually completely at the development phase for ammonia in this particular aspect. So you can look at it, you know exactly what it means for ports around the world, and it's completely fuel neutral and technology neutral. We don't have a stake in the game. We just want transparency. Because if you have transparency about what a port is going to be able to give you, and you bring ship owners in and you say, look, you're going to be able to get this at our port, and fuel providers can go, right, we have a market for this. Then the conversations can really start about moving from theoretical to practical. How much do you need? What do we need to invest in? What is the timeline for that? So that's what I think we're looking at.
Oh, that's great, and that's a great work over there that we do jointly in Namrata, and I think it will be very much appreciated by the industry when it is being concluded towards the end of the year, beginning of next year.
Fingers crossed.
Hopefully, that's great. But it was some great comments here about the entrepreneurial kind of role that the ports are playing in energy transition, and also the need of collaboration. And the question is, if it is to dive a bit deeper, what type of tools we have to make all this happen, to respond to that challenge when it comes, for instance, do we need incentives, bonus and malus strategies? How do we drive that change, and who is financing these changes within a port? Is it within our business models, government support, other? What would you say, Elvir?
So, Hector, you said it, and Namrata, you were touching on it, that ports are the link between water and land. Screw that link if we don't know how to use it. We need to learn how to use that link, otherwise we are just a geography that happens to have a waterfront property, right? And the way we use it, the way we adapt those business models, this is my personal opinion, is we need to start putting pressure on our customers. Pressure. If you want to do business with us,
Someone is putting pressure on you right now.
Exactly. Somebody's going to turn off this mic. Probably MSC here behind. If you want to do business with us, you need to show that you can come in with green assets. And I'm not saying that you turn that from 0 to 100, because there are restraints for the green assets, right? There is not enough fuel, there's not enough capital. But if you can say that 5% of my truck assets or 3% of my ship assets calling your port will be green, all right, let's continue to do business. And then you put it up as a waterfall. So you keep you keep using that pressure. And I'm not saying pressure to destroy value. I'm talking about pressure that creates value, because
it's
none
driving
of us
innovation.
Exactly. None of us would be sitting here if we thought that decarbonizing the shipping industry would destroy value, would we? So it creates value. Then you would have the cargo owners that are ready to pay more. I mean, you look at any of these big summits, like where the big industry leaders in Europe are going, you will not see any CEO, she or he, saying, we will not pay more for green transports. On the contrary, they want to. It's up to us to provide them the green transport. And again, I'm saying it, the business model for us, it is about creating incentive, for sure. So, please cut in.
I was about to say, I'm about to challenge you, because I've actually heard some CEOs say they don't want to pay a lot for it, but I think the nuance in that conversation is we don't want to be paying more than other people are paying. We need a level playing field, which is why I think you're right. You need the incentives, you need the carrot, but you also need the stick. You need regulations that are going to force people minimum levels, and then we reward good players. We want people to be driving, and as you said, I think your waterfall idea is genius, right? You start here, we know that you're making all these steps, and then eventually you will be green.
I mean, I do firmly believe that so look, there's a couple of things that needs to take place before that requirement can be put in place. We as ports, back to what you were talking about, we need to ensure that there is alternative energy available in the port so that ships can bunker and trucks can fuel.
Yes.
But we don't need to scale it up to 1,000,000% day one. We can start by covering one ship and 10 trucks. And then let's start and then put pressure on those trucks. You have to be green. You have to use. What's the point of having shore power electricity if ships don't plug in? I'll give you a great example. So we have invested with a Finnish company called Awake. We have invested in a just-in-time solution for the purpose of digitalization, for the purpose to make sure that the ships that come to the berths are not anchoring, waiting for berth, right? The whole purpose of that is to create more efficient supply chain and to reduce CO2 by 3,000 tons. Just because I have that tool and we've invested in it, does it mean that ships will not anchor for 2 hours anyway? No, it doesn't. Yeah. But when I put pressure on them saying you're only allowed to anchor half an hour, and the rest I'll charge you $1 million per hour. Do you think that that will change behavior? It will.
Yeah, no, that's a very good example in the paradigm. Hector, from your perspective, again, how can the Port Authority really make that change? How you can assist it through business models, incentives?
Well, as I said, I think it's everyone's business. It cannot be faced by one single stakeholder. The port must invest. I think the terminals must invest. The shipping lines must invest. The states must invest, and the European Union has to invest. It's a huge challenge that we have, and with a single part, it's not possible to achieve. So I think it's a matter of everyone. It's to find a way on this cross-collaborative, and to everybody understand that we are facing the same, that we are working for the same. So I think the business model must be shared completely. It's not a matter only for the ports, it's not a matter only for the ship lines. We have to work together and not disalignment. We have to be aligned on this. So for me, it's not a part or this part of who is responsible. It's responsible of everybody. As a port, we have to provide the facilities, we have to provide the investments on infrastructures. We have to have a strategic plan to do this, but the terminals has also their policies and has to be aligned with the port ones. So for me, it's clear. It's not many ways. We have to be converged in a single way.
All together. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, and a really good example to look at it that's already happening in maritime is the formation of green corridors, right? Because you cannot form a green corridor by going, I'm port A, I'm port B, done, green corridor. You need the ship owners to be on side, you need the suppliers to be on side, you need policies to actually be in place, and of course, more importantly, you need buy-in on what a green corridor is. Because if you have a single ship that uses LNG going from port A to port B and everything else uses HFO, technically it was green, but it isn't. What we should be doing, and I'm not saying that this is what's happening, but what we should be doing, in my opinion, is using the leverage that we have, using our incentives, using the conversations and the research, because God knows there are so many projects. We're all working so hard to make sure that we share the information, we share the innovation, and we reward those that are working ahead. We shouldn't be penalizing people for taking risks. Not everything is going to work. Some fuels are going to fail. Some of the infrastructure is going to become obsolete. But if we look at it as iterative rather than pass-fail, then it's a completely different ballgame, right? Then we're like, we learned this from this, we're doing better here.
That's great, Namrata, and you give us a very good pass on green corridors, where I wanted to drive the discussion as well as a second, well, let's say, theme and circle, because obviously we all liked the concept when it went out, and we still like it, I think, and you see too many, quite some ports around the world, and Elvir, you went to one of those ports that announced recently 2 green corridors, if I'm not wrong. So it's definitely a very interesting concept, and a concept that has the potential to drive decarbonization and to drive change and to show how it is done and so demonstrate innovation. But what are really the challenges and maybe risks as well associated to and the opportunities we can take off? Because I think that as sector as well, what we would hate to see would be that these green corridors end up being just signing exercises that in 5 years' time we will kind of, too many, not so much, not connected, etc. What do you see as challenges, Elvir, and what would you like to achieve within your green corridors? What do you like to see as, success factors of those corridors, and how they would connect in the future as well between them?
I don't know what a success factor is, because this is a new phenomenon, but I do know what challenges look like for us, and that is, if we have a green corridor agreement that says that this shipping lane should be green within 15, 20 years, that will be very binary, meaning we will wait for the perfect solution, we will wait for the energy, we will wait for the carriers to invest in green assets and retrofits, and then 2 years before we're there, it will convert green or green-ish. But we have lost the potential of working and reducing CO2 footprint in the 15 years. I think the challenge is not to get stuck that it should be perfect from day one, but work on the small solutions, reduce the speed, use a little bit more of that fuel versus this fuel, multi-tanks, just-in-time arrivals. And what I would like to see, and what we will see in the contracts that we have signed for Green Corridor, it is to measure on a year-by-year basis how much has the CO2 reduced. And even if it's only 2%, Why 2%? What have we done? So we need to do these incremental changes in weight of that big, 200,000 tons of green ammoniac or whatever, which will come. But I don't want to sit on my hands on that contract for those 10 years it takes for that technology to work.
Hector, what is well, as Port of Barcelona, are you thinking along the lines of green corridors and establishing such corridors within other parties?
Yeah, of course. But this corridors
I
must...
don't think it's working.
The
You
mic.
have a really bad luck with mics.
Do you want to lean into my mic? Yeah, you can talk into here.
Oh, come on.
We collaborate.
We have a microphone problem here.
Hello?
Is there another mic?
Is it working now?
Yeah, now it's
Okay,
better. Yeah.
Sorry. I have to concentrate again, sorry. But about green corridors. Well, we think that the green corridors won't came suddenly, okay? I mean, the green corridors would have sense in the existing ones. Green corridors must have commercial sense, trade sense.
Can
And
everyone
afterwards-
hear?
Your mic is off.
Good, then it's just me. Go for it.
See, can you hear me? No? Well, what I say is that maybe we have to convert the existing corridors to green corridors. And as Elvir say, maybe the green corridor, the most optimal one, would be as a paramount. But in the midterm, we have different stages. Maybe we have to start working with the melt in the fields. We have to work with reducing the speeds. We have to start with this. Maybe the paramount is the absolutely green corridor, with zero emissions. But what happens now?
The iterative process, absolutely
Exactly.
learning
Iterate and
and working
progress.
with what we have.
I'm facing in on this. But for me, it's like this. Now there are corridors. We try to be that these ones be more green if possible by implementing some measures, by implementing some existing fields till we can reach this paramount stage of a perfect green corridor. That's my view.
Oh, it's
I mean,
interesting. Yeah.
I think so. I think both of you are actually saying similar things in that we're looking at iterative processes. We're not going to start on day one absolutely green. And I think what I would like to see, and I'm very aware this is just a concept that we came up with while we were getting our makeup done, but what we're thinking of is something along the lines of, the CII that's coming in for ships, where you turn around and you say you're going to get a grade depending on what you've done over the past year. And if you're below a certain grade, you have to work to be better. You have to have a plan to improve your thing and to have a target. And there are, of course, if you're an A or B listed ship, there are incentives for you. If you're an A or B listed green corridor, you get like certain carbon incentives. And if you're not, then you have to work harder at it. I mean, obviously, I'm not defending the CII. I think it's a great concept, and I think it just needs a little bit more work put into it. But I think that we should be, as I said, very clear that green corridors are to encourage innovation. It can't be a tick box exercise, and it's going to have to work each year, because our definition of green today is definitely not going to be the definition of green 10 years from now, when they're going to be like, you were using what fuel, doing what to the environment?
But I would like to add to that, because I do agree with you, Namrata, and you're absolutely right. But again, I think we need to try not to get stuck in the fuel. We're talking about decarbonization, right? Type of fuel and technology, that just becomes, how did you decarbonize? But I want to take a look at the models. So again, I'm coming back to what I said earlier. Why are we doing this to begin with? I mean, obviously, we can't do business on a dead planet. I think everybody agrees. So aside from the evident, we are trying to create value. And I do believe that we need to remove the word cheap out of transport. BCOs and cargo owners, there's many of them that are willing. There is many of them that are willing to pay. If we can tie the conversation, the idea behind a corridor is to make a complex transport system transparent.
Yes.
We choose one corridor, point to point, and then you get those BCOs to say, are you going to pay for a reduction of CO2? And mind you, you will soon enough anyway, because your scope 3 will get taxed.
Absolutely.
So let's stay ahead of the curve. And that's where I do believe, and I witnessed it, where ports can have a great conversation. Why? Because if a shipping line goes to the cargo owner, it becomes a business conversation of transactional value. But if the port drives that conversation with the shipping line, with the cargo owner as a neutral party, without any business interest, that becomes a value creation conversation instead. And it also becomes a value conversation, not between a salesperson from a carrier and a procurement person in BCO, but between C-suite levels where conversation becomes strategic. And we have a great responsibility there.
I literally couldn't agree more about it not being a conversation about cost, because what we're actually also looking about is the value conversation, and part of your value also has to be reputation. You want to be known as a green port. You want to be known as a green carrier. We have ESG reporting which is linked to finance. So when people are saying, oh, you know, finance is a bit difficult, we know that you have ESG reporting requirements. You're going to have to prove best practice, and if not even best practice, at the very least, good intent. You know? So it's happening, it's already here. We are the right people to have this conversation, to be kind of pushing it forward. Hector? I was about to say, what do you think? Because I realized I talked over you.
Yeah. No, hearing you, and it's very interesting. I would say that, you know, and you mentioned it, Elvir, as well, we are on the starting stages of green corridors, and also we discussed this within the Climate and Energy Committee of IAPH recently, and I think, yeah, it's fair to say that some of these corridors, on a way, they might fail, they might, you know, not be so successful, etc. And I'm saying that because there will be a discussion in December at IMO as well on whether IMO should be putting in place, you know, a green corridor program as part of its revised greenhouse gas strategy. And we had very divergent views over there, exactly due to that fact that we are really starting now. We want to try out things rather than having a regulatory body jumping into that. But there are some arguments, and we will discuss it quite a lot in December as well, representing the ports over there. But no, thank you very much for this insight. Maybe another thing I wanted to mention on that is that, of course, you mentioned also energy efficiency and savings on corridors. And I see the value of this approach, but I also understand that, you know, the whole concept when established was really in order to drive the new fuels and everything on the basis of zero carbon fuels, etc. So despite that every little bit help, I think it will have to be carried in parallel with some main collaboration with the parties to make the new fuels a reality within the established green corridors, of course. And yeah, sorry.
But you said something there, right? The measurements. I mean, most of us work for an employer that pays us a salary, and most of us work for a business that thrives in having a solid, healthy P&L. How do we get to a solid, healthy P&L? We measure the heck out of it, right? There's monthly reports that says, here's how much money you've earned, and it becomes something that drives behavior. So when we talk about green corridors and CO2 emissions, why don't we at least start by having an interactive actual emission? I mean, around here, I saw 3 companies that can install light bulbs to measure emissions. Let's start with that so that we can have a dashboard that says emissions are going up or down, and let's have that part of our DNA at the very least.
That's very interesting. Yeah, indeed.
We're starting that already, right? That's part of what the CII and the EXI are going to do, is that data transparency at a very basic level. And then I think that there is no reason that we can't use the IMO system as a baseline and do better. Because there's a big difference between compliance and innovation. The IMO and the regulatory system is compliance. You have to meet a minimum standard. But if we're talking green corridors, do better. If you can, why not? Be that leader, be that early mover, get that. Remember that there are financial gains to be had, but there are so many reputational gains to be had. And also, at the end of the day, as you said, we can't do business on a dead planet.
Great. Maybe moving a bit, and you know, we are discussing smart ports, and it's a smart port organized conference, and many smart ports around the table as well, and everything. How would you see the link between smart port and energy transition, let's say? What is a smart port when it comes to energy management, Elvir? What would you say?
I think my mic works still, right? Hector, you want to take, this feels like your home turf.
Yep. Yes. Okay, in our strategic plan, in Barcelona Port strategic plan, we had the smart. For us, smart means sustainability, modality, agile, resilient, and transparent. All of them are related with decarbonization. All of them.
Absolutely.
Sustainability, decarbonization. Intermodality, reduce emissions. By railway to increase the share of railway, short shipping, whatever. Agile, the same. You have to be flexible. You have to adapt to the future. Resilient, you are not resilient if still are based on fossil fuels and transparent. What kind of image reputation as a port we give if you are not a clean port, if not a green port? For it is clear, it's easy.
Absolutely. No, very good points there. Things to add?
Back to me.
Or Elvir?
Still works?
Yeah, still works, I think.
Good. No, you'll just echo. But to be honest, I don't know. I have no idea what the link symbiosis is between smart ports and energy transitions. I do know what I was taught in 6th grade in school when you talk about finances. When you talk about finances, it's about householding and managing your resources in a smart way. So I kind of take that with me when we talk about smart ports and energy transition. It is about managing the resources you need to service your ecosystem, customers, and so on and so forth. Managing them smart. And by resources, I mean, we have endless resources also when it comes to us. Human capital. I mean, we all struggle to find the competence and staff. So that's also managing and being a smart port. So energy transition, in all honor, but it is about not overcommitting. It is about managing the needs in a clever way. And for that sake, at least from a European perspective, electricity. All of the energy sectors that we want to see, whether that be ammoniac, methanol, whatever it is, all of it needs electricity. And if it's something we don't have in Europe these days, it is access to green electricity. So let's just be a little smart about what we want to produce, how much we want to produce to manage the electricity access that we have.
So for me, and I think you actually nailed it earlier in the conversation when you talked about data, measure the hell out of it. A smart port is a port that is constantly improving. We need to benchmark what we have, whether it's the amount of fuel available, whether it's the CO2 emissions, whether we're retaining the right staff and we're able to recruit, because we're recruiting more increasingly from places like Google and Amazon and IKEA. We need that tech savvy, we need that data friendliness to be able to do this. And more importantly, I also think we need to remember that we are a global industry in a way that very few others are. So we need to share this knowledge and share these systems with ports in developing countries because we want them to be using the same systems as us so that we can actually have an apples to apples, look at this corridor, everything is measured the same. Look at the improvements we're making, this is all measured the same. If we keep doing our own little systems and working in silos, we're, I would say, a dumb port. I know, sorry.
Okay.
You can tell I work in comms.
Indeed, indeed. Hector, and I'll give you a quote from Elvir yesterday, and I'd like a comment for you. I mean, Elvir was arguing yesterday in a session with Pascal that we need to take destiny in our own hands when it comes to energy production and produce in ports the amount of green energy we need, or at least a certain percentage of that energy, in order to serve our customers, not to make a business out of it, but in order to serve our needs. What would you say, and what do you think in Barcelona about that?
One of the main pillars of our energy transition plan is the implementation of renewable energy, especially solar energy, because we are in a Mediterranean country. We have no wind here. We have the airport very close to. We have a protected area with a lot of waterfowl and birds, so we have solar. But we have a lot of solar. We have, at least we have nowadays a potential of more than 100 megawatts, and with the new developments, even we can double the folder. We have 200 megawatts of potential here in Port of Barcelona. So for us, it's a crucial point to implement the renewable energy in the ports, because we want to be autonomous. We want to be self-sufficient as much as possible. And there is another point here. As Barcelona Port, we also are studying to move to the hinterland, to the countryside, to produce our own energy there and to import to the port. Why not? The ports has terminals in the continent, has terminals in the railway, has terminals inside, landwards. Why not to have, if we are an intensive consumer, why not to have or to develop farms or solar farms in the hinterland?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to be as much as autonomous as possible, because we have the energy is not only let's say, a factor to decarbonize. It's not a factor, let's say, a competitive factor. It's a competitive factor also. And you have to ensure to your terminals, to the port community, a stable, green, and competitive energy. And to do this, you have to produce as much as possible your own energy. And if you have to go there, out to the port, out to the boundaries of the port, you have to do this. Why not?
So it's great to see you agreeing on that, because I've heard you, Elvir, yesterday, and I think you were mentioning like that some targets that you have as well to kind of produce, I don't know, about the 40% of energy that you need in Gothenburg, or I understood it wrong? I mean, you want to add some things on that?
No, whoa.
You're really on the mic now.
No, you're absolutely right. It is about, and I think you touched it beautifully there, Hector. Ports need access to electricity. We aim to produce at the very least 40% of our future energy need or electricity need on our own. Now, just to give you a context, right? The city where I'm from needs 800 megawatts of electricity to fuel the city. Today, the port that I'm responsible for consumes 20 of that. By 2030, I will need 225 of that. Who goes first? Household or a port, right? Households go first. So we need to make sure that we can be self-sufficient as much as humanly possible, because to your point, it will be a matter of competitive advantage, cost advantage, for sure. Now, but the question comes, and you touched base on it, we can do this because we have a strong balance sheet, strong P&L, we can invest, What happens with the ports that are south of us? How do we help them? Because we've achieved nothing if we still only think Europe.
I mean, for me, the answer is sharing that information, sharing the resources, and I think you're absolutely right. Look, there are advantages. There is a financial incentive and opportunity to invest in renewable energy, whether it's wind or solar or tidal, whatever it is. And I mean, I think your point about remembering that we're just with the link between ship and shore, but there's a lot of land on shore for us to be using. We are so maritime focused, we're not necessarily thinking of solar farms in the hinterlands, and we absolutely should be. But we need to share this information with developing countries, because otherwise we as an industry are not going to meet our goals. And we as a world are going to fail terribly to meet climate accord agreements. I mean, earlier today we talked about ports expanding in international agreements, and I heard people talk about sharing information and having bases there. We have systems. We should be using them, and whether it comes in the form of human resource and knowledge, whether it comes in the form of agreements to lead to financial investment, there are different models, and we would be fools not to use them. And we would be really quite foolish not to use them early on enough so that those that are taking the risks also see some of the benefits. We should be doing it. We will win financially and we will win environmentally, and we cannot forget that.
No, absolutely. And if we look at the global stage as well and at IMO and everything, I think this notion of just and equitable and inclusive transition for all is really at the heart and the key to unblock these discussions and this progress there. And we absolutely need that. It's great.
I was thinking about that. We're talking about 800,000 seafarers that are going to need low carbon training, right? If we're able to meet in scenario 3 of the DNV report that they released. I'm just like, how many of these people are going to be available to us as ports? Because we need to start training now. And we're competing with industries that are really carbon intensive. I'm thinking like construction, right? We're going to be looking for the best ways, but there are also other opportunities. The carbon market is a potential. Like if we can capture carbon at really good qualities, it could be used for industrial purposes. I mean, if you get the highest quality, it's food grade. There's all your sodas. There's so many little places that we could really innovate, and we should be thinking bigger than just a green corridor or just a new ship or just a single fuel.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Usually we would have a couple of minutes for questions. I think we just have 3 minutes for questions. So if there is any question from the audience, please would like to take it. Yeah. Here
it's interact. Oh no,
it's.
No.
No.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. Very good.
Now we can.
So this will be only a 3-minute question, so then you have a couple of seconds to answer.
We have two.
Yeah. About hydrogen, you discuss about decarbonization, electrification is clear. What do you think, which role can play hydrogen as a green molecule in the port electrification and decarbonization process? Do you see a role for hydrogen, and where and how?
Please, gentlemen.
Yes, so back home in Gothenburg, next year we are starting our own hydrogen production. And what are the purposes of it? Will it be used in ships? No. Commercial ships will not use it because it takes too much energy. You don't get out of it what you need out of it. We see the use of it on trucks. There are hydrogen-powered trucks by Scania, Volvo. Back home, I know there's more brands globally that are being launched and rolled out during next year. These are the trucks that will go long distance. They need hydrogen. So we have two hydrogen tank stations that are going live. One has gone live, and the other one is going live next year as well in September, where trucks will be able to fuel hydrogen produced in the port. I also see the need for hydrogen for local port consumption. If a ship comes in and she wants to plug in to power, and I don't have a power supply there, I can move a hydrogen battery and create power. So it's easy to move in a narrowed port.
Great. Something to add, Hector?
Well, I don't see the hydrogen in the commercial ships, because not only the efficiency, but also the room. The hydrogen is a very low density, it's a very low density fuel. So maybe, but some hydrogen, vectors like e-methanol or ammonia, yeah, that one has more sense than hydrogen itself. And I also see the hydrogen with the land, let's say the port, the terminal machinery, and the trucks, the heavy duty transport. This may be one of the let's say the consumers of the hydrogen, as well as some industry in the ports, because in the ports we have some industries. So maybe this is the two ways that I see the hydrogen.
I mean, I think that what you really need to be looking at is long term. So when we talk about hydrogen at the moment, we're just like, do we see it on ships right now? No, but will it eventually power batteries that perhaps end up on ships, and we look at fuel cells?
Absolutely.
We don't know. Technology is changing rapidly. I think what we really need to be is open to using the lowest carbon, the lowest emission energy sources in every way we can, and moving with technology and embracing new technologies. And I think, I mean, to be honest, in the long term, I think hydrogen will be a very important part.
So I'm to have that conversation. So I'm not a technician or chemist by any sense, right? But hydrogen loses efficiency. So using electricity to produce hydrogen to then power industry locally in the port where there's already electricity, talk about not being a smart port. So that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We need to be smart in the sense where we really look at how we use the resources.
Yep.
So I do see hydrogen to be used in the places where there is no electricity grid. Again, trucks in certain portions, or certain portions of the port where ships can't plug in because there is no outlet. But otherwise, I think we should be very careful in producing hydrogen and losing 30% of energy every time we convert it.
Yeah. I want to stop the discussion
there's a
here
risk.
because I know that we need to close, and I want to thank you
Yeah.
and to wrap up. And I'm sure that we will be in the disposition of everybody to answer some more questions. I want to thank you very much, Namrata, Hector, and Elvir. I think we had a very interesting conversation today, and of course, we can talk for ages about it and for all the things. But thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Great. Thank you.
Thank you to Antonis, and thank you also to the speakers. It's been an interesting discussion about decarbonization, as I'm sure the next panel session will be too. That will be in just 10 minutes. We'll come back very soon, so don't move, please.